Kathy Butterly, who will be in conversation today. And yeah, they'll talk for a while and then we'll have questions at the end. So take it away.
All right.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody for coming.
And I want to thank also George, and I want to thank Charlotte for being amazing, and Allie, and everybody with the gallery. And for me, it's a thrill to be at this gallery that shows also artists that who are my teachers at graduate school, like Elmer Bischoff and Joan Brown, who I TA'd for. Roy DeForest wasn't a teacher, but he was a close friend and kind of took me under his wing during graduate school and made frames for me, and he even spoke at our graduation. And also Luis Azucita, I had a seminar with him also. So it's nice to be here, and thank you. And thank you, Kathy, for being such a great friend and being here with me.
Of course. How could I not? I mean, the thing about I'll go into our relationship a little bit before we get into the big questions, is I was thinking about this today, like when was the first time I met Linda? And I believe it was when you were in a studio. What was that gallery?
It was Jenny Schuler.
Yeah, what was that gallery?
Esso
Gallery. So
I was renting Susanna Coffey's studio.
I think that's when we first met. And the thing is that we met at a time when we were both pregnant with our first kids. And so thinking about this trajectory of you and me, we've both had 2 kids at the same time, and still both of us made work continuously for, 27 years now. So nonstop. Linda made this while, juggling everything, but that's the beginning of our friendship, was art and children. So that's the other thing that we have in common, is we both were raised in New Jersey, and we lived about 20 minutes away from each other, but we didn't know each other.
Yeah.
So when I saw this work, I'm familiar with this landscape because it's the Meadowlands, pretty much, right?
Some of it is.
Some of it is the Meadowlands.
A lot of it is, and a lot of the highways areas are right around the Meadowlands, New Jersey Turnpike.
Right. So I guess my first question is, growing up in New Jersey, like how. Now you're a New Yorker and you made these when you were living in New York. What inspired you to go back and remake? Is it nostalgia, or is it a landscape that you just feel so passionately in love with? Also, why the materials? Why the found objects?
There's a lot in that question.
There is a lot. That's the whole talk.
Well, first, I want to say that I taught myself how to paint figuratively to make these paintings. Like, I had these as an idea. And all through undergrad and graduate school, I had only worked abstractly. And I had worked with 3 dimensions because early on I experimented with arc welding and painting. I took a class, Clay is Anarchy. And so I was always kind of playing with, painting on different surfaces.
So this was in grad school?
In undergrad, I started with doing sculpture, painting on sort of wall sculptures. And in grad school, I started having the work, I tried to work on canvas, and they were kind of works that were sort of alluding to landscape, like they were landscape-ish. And then I think I was somehow working in that kind of alluding way, because I'm such a, I'm not the most subtle person in the world, and so I wanted something more definitive. Like, I think I heard my father's Viennese voice saying, what are you doing? And so I wanted to kind of make something. And I was at an art residency in Massachusetts, and someone was going out to paint in plein air every day, and I was like, why would somebody do that? And I thought, and then I had this sort of idea of what I would do with it. So when I went back, I was living in Hoboken, so New Jersey, and I was also commuting to teaching in Westchester, so I was in my car quite a bit. And but New Jersey was like my place. It's like, the Garden State is actually like the highway state. And as you know, I don't know if you've had the same, like, I don't know if your part of New Jersey was the same as mine in
Right.
terms of feeling like, I think I said this to Phil something, like I said like, well, you know, I do these, you know, beautiful landscapes on scrap metal, and he was like, are they beautiful? They're like highways? And I was like, of course highways are beautiful. Doesn't everybody feel that way? So I don't know if you had this sort of highway like culture where you are as much.
I had a different New Jersey experience. I drove through your town to get to New York City,
Right.
but I grew up in a really idyllic, like kind of no garbage, like really greenery and beauty. And that's actually something that I kind of wanted to bring up is that, I mean, I thought I was going to ask it later, but there's the one painting in the back that I was thinking of, the one over there in the left-hand corner.
That was the Meadowlands one, right?
The Meadowlands. I thought when I came here like a week or 2 weeks ago to look at the show before, you know, deciding to talk, you know, to do our talk, and what dawned on me was like, growing up in New Jersey and going by the Meadowlands, I always knew it coming from where I grew up in New Jersey, which was like green grass and chirping birds. I drove by the Meadowlands and I would be like, oh, this is where they always say like the dead bodies are buried, and like there's trash along the highway, but really if you look at it, it's a beautiful ecosystem, and there's like all these animals and birds living there, and so there's this like, you know, this beautiful lush landscape, but it's surrounded by what I would say ugliness. So I was thinking with that painting in the back, like it's the Meadowlands, and you're painting on what I'm assuming is garbage, like found material, something that could have been found on the side of the road, trashed right there in the Meadowlands, but you're identifying with the beauty of the Meadowlands. So can we talk about that?
Well, that's what to me, the Meadowlands was like the moat around New York City that you would sort of drive through, you know, on the way to New York City. And it's like toxic, but it's also beautiful. And there are actually these beautiful walking paths. When I went and I did some work, like later project, and I would go walking through, you can go walking through there, like even today. Yeah. There's some great paths through there. So yeah, and it's like, so, you know, to me, so where I was from, I think is a little grittier than where you were from. Like for me, like like half a mile at the end of my road was Route 3. And it was kind of a mix. It was like, Clifton was more like by Montclair, and also by Passaic, which was a little, there were, you know, sort of light industry and cemeteries and nice suburbs and less nice ones. So it was kind of more of a mixed area. And like New Jersey, I just identified with also because my parents were both immigrants. They were like, my parents had come to the United States like, they had been, when we were born, they were like, had been there like 3 or 5 years. I mean, they came in their 20s. My mother was from Shanghai, China, and like came to Montreal first because of like the Chinese Revolution. And my father went from Vienna to boarding school in Switzerland, moved to Australia, and then to New York because of, you know, Auschwitz, blah, 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 my grandfather and all that. So, but they, you know, ended up coming, and so they were both from very different cultures. Yeah. And I didn't know anybody else whose parent was from anywhere else other than New Jersey. And so it was like, I don't know, it was kind of like New Jersey, I was very American, and my parents were not. And so there was something about that I really adopted when it came to like, what's my subject in art. I just embraced New Jersey, maybe also because other people don't. And you know, and it's like, yes, it's gorgeous. So, yeah.
You find the beauty in it.
Completely, yeah.
So so to speak about like these car parts, primarily, right?
They're primarily car parts, right? One ironing board, one locker door, one shelf.
So when I'm looking at these, like my point of view is, personally, I'm the driver. Yeah. And I feel like I'm looking through the windshield, but they're really from the side of a car. So that's like really weird to me. Like it's kind of twists my head a little bit. So can you talk about, like, first of all, like where do you find the car parts? And how did you even come across this idea of using car parts? I mean, it makes sense to me, but let's hear it from you.
Yes, so there's a lot in that also. Some of the things I would just find, like at first I just sort of did a lot of found, I lived in Hoboken, there was trash around, I would go see something, I'd pick it up.
So you were hauling these like around the streets of Hoboken? Like
sometimes, yeah, and I would have a stash, like some people, you have a stash of canvases that you're working on. I had a stash of metal. Yeah. So when I was ready to start a new piece, I would take my I had my snapshots and I would sort of line them up on the floor and line up pieces of metal, and I would kind of like figure out what, how it would match. And of course the image kind of gets distorted over the shape, so it's not always exactly what I expect it to be. And because I had this experience of doing, welding and going to a steel yard, I knew, I sort of had this idea of people collecting stuff. So I had contacted a couple of auto body places, and there was one in Hackensack, New Jersey, who saved pieces for me. And I'd call him up, and he's like, "Oh, wait another week," or "Yeah, come now, I have some great ones." And he would write down the name of the cars on the back of them as if, like, whether it was a Honda or a Volvo meant something to me, which I didn't know the difference. I still don't. But and even I'm still arguing about, like, that's part of the car door. No, it's a wheel panel, so I don't even know exactly the car parts. But even not painted, these kind of objects put on a wall have this great kind of kinetic, shape to them, almost like a bird in flight, some of them. And so I had work collected from that, and then I would, put it together with, different, and I guess, Road Trip, the name of the show, is sort of appropriate because a lot of it is from New Jersey, but it's definitely from, just like this one is from Southampton, but I don't remember even ever going to Southampton. I think I was just like, it's a snapshot out the window of the car going, I'm not sure where.
So I have so many questions for you now, but I guess the first is to readdress the plein air paintings versus working from a photograph. So how do you feel like when you're doing one versus the other, and like have you ever brought a car part out to nature and paint?
There was a little photograph of me that I had. There was actually a piece of metal on that. But it could have had a photograph on it also, because in plein air was never my thing. I went out once when I was at Yaddo with like a real traditional landscape artist, and it was really hysterical being on the side of the road painting with her. But it was like, I don't know, there's no place for your coffee, and you can't go to the bathroom, and so it wasn't like my thing. And I
love
like
it.
That didn't matter so much to me. So I was happy to work from photographs, and it's nice to see nature every now and then to kind of know, and I was always, I didn't it was hard for me also learning to paint cars and trees and all that, because I hadn't had experience with that, so I'm always felt sort of like a little bit of a fake. Like, are those, I still don't know in that painting in the back there whether the lines on the highway are accurate or not. Like somebody who really is somebody who's learned perspective in a traditional way might say, "Oh no, you got it all wrong."
But I also wonder, how accurate does it need to be, because it's on a curved piece of metal?
Well,
I guess that comes up to how challenging are these for you? You do, because they're sculptural, you do, and your photograph is flat. How do you work with the bends and are these textured at all when you're painting them? Do you have to sand the metal down? What's your process, basically?
In the beginning, I would work with anything, and I would use navel jelly and wash them off, and then I would always put spray enamel Rust-Oleum over them, and then later I just used cleaner and cleaner parts, so I didn't have to do that. So some of them do have textures from the found material, whatever it is. The earlier works also are, I think you could tell which ones in the show even are first, because they were, I think I started loosely when I was, when I first started, and then I really wanted to make a realist painting, because I felt like what, it would be as opposite as you could get from working on junk as working on like something that's it wasn't just like an impressionist kind of thing on the metal. It was like doing, like on the ironing board, it was a very sort of tight, sort of drawn kind of thing. So I wanted it to have that sort of opposite kind of idea.
I noticed on the painting, I think it's this one right here, there's a lot of texture, like road texture. Like you really feel the concrete ground of the road. Was that a texture that was there, or did you add that? Like
I didn't add any texture.
Oh, so that was there from like the road. Just it just that's so.
And maybe
used
from
it
going
really
over
well.
it. I mean, sometimes I would I'd turn them around and I would start doing you rode one way on it, and then I thought, no, it's not working. So there's a bit of, there's a trial and error in terms of composition, in terms of wanting to, how you enter the piece. And so that sometimes it's not unusual for me to completely turn the piece upside down and start working on them, but if it didn't work out.
So now I want to kind of get into the East Coast, West Coast thing a little bit. Like when I'm looking, because I'm facing this way, I'm looking at this one, and I'm just wondering, I'm thinking, that has that feeling of some of the Wayne Thiebaud paintings of San Francisco, like going up the really steep, hills and whatever. And then I'm thinking of some of the ones with the holes in them, like Baldessari, and because these are, I'm just bringing up California, how did California influence you? Did Wayne Thiebaud influence you? Who are your influences?
I think that I like the irreverence and the kind of poking fun kind of stuff of the Bay Area artists. And I also like that for me, these were not referencing Fauve paintings or Cezanne. They were referencing more like master painters, not that I was trying to paint like Claude Lorraine or Constable, but it was the idea of doing something that wasn't impressionist or 20th century. It was more like an older kind of look, again, for a way of getting it different than the support they were on. And then, so I think that, Roy DeForest was somebody who I just, I always felt like his work also kind of looked to history and art history in a bit. To me, his dogs are kind of like the Sistine Chapel, which is a weird thing to say, but there is some kind of, and Joan Brown was a big influence in terms of somebody who really did her own thing. And Rob Arneson, so, I think I felt related to them, even though I had also, had Louisa Chase and Judy Pfaff, giving me critiques from RISD and that kind of stuff. But I feel that emotionally, I feel tied to the West Coast kind of art.
So that makes me think, do you think that part of the West Coast thinking in a way is by using car parts is kind of I'm going to do what I want, I'm going to, instead of using the stretched canvas or whatever. And
then they're kind of funny. It's like you're painting a highway scene on a car. And there's it's not ha-ha funny, but there's a sort of humor to them in that. And where the holes in the sky are, or in the street, where the holes are and how they kind of fit in. I was going to say something else. I can't remember.
Well, another thing is these are possibly car parts from cars that were wrecked. And then once again, you're just painting something, I keep looking at this one because this is my point of view, just the beauty of what you found in New Jersey, the beautiful. And I do find the gestures in the metal, they really do kind of correspond with the gestures of driving on these roads, and you really do feel like you're on a road trip rather than being in a rectangle or a square. I think that you really do get this sense of motion because of the forms that they're on.
After 9/11, I stopped working on scrap metal on these pieces for a while, and it's interesting. I was doing another sort of series. I always work very project-based. I'll deal with landscape, but I was working on perforated metal pieces, and then there was the pandemic, and I started working on a different project again. But anyway, so I didn't. after 9/11, of course, the idea of working on a metal that was, something that was from an accident was kind of more real to me.
Yeah.
Walking, living down by, in Tribeca, walking at Pace where I was teaching at the time. So it was like, so there's a sadness also. They're funny, they're sad. Like I like that the metal, they're poignant in that there are a lot of different kinds of ways of looking at them.
Yeah.
I also see them as some kind of like a memento mori. There's like there are these dead objects that were put to rest, and in a way, I'm recycling them.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
Is there a point, like a part of your process where you're like, I'm helping, like I'm recycling materials.
And I can't say from making 20, paintings, I can't say that I'm really doing a lot of service to the world in recycling, but it is definitely the environment and all that is definitely a part of these because of that. It is definitely, it's part of the it's a, sort of a Anthropocene kind of like, taking, sort of the detritus and then, just sort of highlighting detritus in a way with these crazy car parts.
So with your paintings, do you do preparatory drawings at all, or are these kind of just like you have your photograph and you're just like working intuitive with the form?
Yeah, I take photographs and then I also draw, but my drawing has always been independent, and I love drawing. I love charcoal drawing, but it's always been independent of planning because you can't really plan for these in a way. So I really kind of, like when I was, like the first time I painted a truck that looked like a truck, I was so proud of myself, but I never drew it first. I just like, went head on into painting with a lot of small brushes and did that.
So like practically, like living in New York City and having all these big metal pieces in your studio, like how do you manage your studio life with?
Carefully, like I just have to keep on culling things.
Yeah.
And I have a wonderful metal shelves behind a wall in my studio that kind of houses like, finished work and junk pieces that aren't finished. And I hadn't worked on these in forever, and I actually had a couple of pieces that were not finished that I took out. And I have my fluorescent deer paintings that I was working on before the show on one side, and I have metal with my oil paint set on the other side. And
so talking about your new works, which we don't get to see here, with these works, would they ever be on metal?
Never say never. Like, right, again, I think of work it's like I've done sort of distinct bodies of work, and so these right now are, I've been doing these deer paintings and other animals from the outdoor camera, like the blink at night, the kind of in the Hudson Valley, and so, and they're in fluorescent orange, so it's really very different color thing than this. But yeah, so I never say never. Like I keep going back to metal and I go back to canvas, and I'm kind of comfortable working both ways. And I find it's a challenge both ways, and even more of a challenge in a way for me personally to do a canvas painting than a metal painting.
Do you think that's because when you're approaching a blank canvas, it's art? Like it's like this white thing that you have to create something, and here you're starting with a found object and you already have your into it.
There's a sense of play. I think there's a give and take. It's not like that kind of surface. So I find it easy to work with.
Yeah. I feel that way. Like when I have a really hard time doing a drawing, or like when I see that white page, I'm just like, ugh, it's so expensive. It's a $5 piece of paper, I'd rather start with a piece of garbage, and I'd have so much more freedom with that. So I think that's why I'm kind of, responding and questioning this, because like, I just love working with like a found idea or a found something. Yeah, because you're not, that invested in it yet. It is a throwaway in a way. Like,
And you also started painting on, like, started making clay, but you were doing glazes. It wasn't like you were painting. You were painting with clay, but again on a not. Did you ever work on canvas? Was that something? I know you were with the question.
Sure, I know. Sure. But that's like why, like, you know, painting is like my passion, my love mostly. But I have to work with form. And so I'm identifying with you in that, like, you know, I feel like you're a painter who paints on forms, and I'm somebody who makes forms that has to paint on them. So, you know, I understand like this need to have something that's already given in a way and work with it. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, let me get the. Sorry, I'm like pretending I'm in my studio, just like singing. So I think I guess I'd like to address also the point of view question again, because you know, the point of view really is from the vantage point of the driver, and yet they're really confusing to me in a good way, because I feel like that's a window that I'm driving through, not the side of a door of a car.
Well,
so,
I probably took it while I was driving. That's why it's a frontal view.
Watch out for Linda. Do not drive.
I don't do that anymore.
But was that like, is that it just happened, or is that like a little bit of a concept for you, like to kind of make us question, like, where is this picture coming from?
Part of it is embracing the car and the view from the car, and
that's
again,
in New Jersey.
Like, yeah, it's right.
Embrace the car, because also like when you were in Hoboken, you had to have a car to go get your material. So it's really a car culture.
Yeah. So and the only one that I have to say is a little bit different is the one that's the all green one with the path. Because that is, you know, not from the car, that's like sort of from the path, from the, and that's more, it doesn't have a horizon, so that's the only one that's like a puzzle piece, or, you know, like it's like a section of it could be a section of a larger piece.
So here, all right, now we're gonna like shift a little bit to your studio practice. Like, how do you, like, now you're on sabbatical.
I certainly am.
And you have all this time to paint. And just curious, like pre-sabbatical, sabbatical, like what's your studio practice? Like, do you have like when you first go into your studio, do you have like a weird ritual? Like, do you like pace, or like, you know, go in your jammies and think first thing in the morning and then get working, or like how's
I do my 15-minute yoga. First I take a shower, 15-minute yoga, have my coffee and my oatmeal. And I get started. And as I was saying before, I used to listen to NPR, like Brian Lehrer, you know, all day. And since the last couple of months, I've not been doing that. And then I just, you know, I can just work. I mean, I haven't really settled in since I've been sabbatical, since, you know, I've been away to India, which was amazing. But yeah, so I'm just, and we'll be, you know, up in the Hudson Valley for the summer, and I'm just happy to have hours and hours to work.
So when you were raising your two boys, how did you juggle finding time in your studio? Because it's pretty clear you're pretty prolific. Like you didn't like rest. You're teaching.
It's like I always, you know, I was always like when they would say, oh, only the 10 of you will still be painting in 10 years. I always hoped it wasn't me, but it's like that bug that you can't let go of. Like I'm addicted to working, and I love it, and I just keep doing it, whether I'm showing, not showing, whatever. I'm really invested in doing it. And you know, I had kids and everything. It was you know, sometimes you get more. For me, it was important to have a studio at home, because I can work in small increments, and I did. Yeah. But I work better in larger increments.
Oh my God, right?
So it's a big difference now. So
So I think I have one last question, and then maybe we can open it up. So the paintings that, I don't know if people here are aware of your new paintings from upstate, of the creatures of the night and whatever. But the colors are so different than what are here, and these are because they're relating to something direct nature. But your animals are sort of direct nature or not, but like they're vivid and they're like kind of psychedelic colors. And like how are you thinking about color?
I think in that one, the photographs that I'm working from they're actually stills from videos are black and white. They're like night ones, so they're kind of have some crazy shadows where there's. So for me, they suggest working with fluorescence. Why, I couldn't possibly say, but so I don't, it's harder to talk about more recent work than older work.
Yeah. So do you think like that is like a kind of a reaction in a way to like, well, I can since I'm not painting something direct from
right, it wasn't like I wanted to make it real. Like I'm not interested in making a painting of a deer. Like that's not my thing.
So is this the California in you coming out?
California and New Jersey.
Yeah. Welded. Your welding came out too. So do you have a question that has never been asked of you that you would like to talk about?
I was thinking of one thing.
Yeah.
And that is, I was thinking about like I wasn't the kid that drew a cat that looked like a cat. Like I didn't have a lot of art when I grew up at all. But the first artist that I was interested in was Van Gogh, because I went to the Metropolitan Museum and saw the red wheelbarrow in a field, and it was all textured, and so it was the first time where I could see like, oh, that's how you make a painting. Like there's the forms of it all together, and I felt like at that time when I accessed that, I felt like, oh, this is possible for me to make art and to do this.
How old were you when you saw that?
I must have been like 11 or 12, and I went home and tried to copy it and did a terrible job. But that's when I first was kind of like thought that being an artist was a thing. I also grew up, my mother from China had brought, I grew up with like Chinese scrolls and Japanese prints around, so not having just the Western view of it was something also I think it wasn't like there was just that one kind of perspective. I was sort of familiar with other ways of thinking about space and all that, so maybe that somehow is filtered into my...
I love that Van Gogh was your first, like,
really?
Yeah. I when I was learning about art when I was very young, I learned like I had to color in the lines, and I had to make everything look realistic. Like that, the goal was to make something look perfect and realistic. And I wish I had seen Van Gogh earlier. I didn't see Van Gogh.
So you're good at doing in the line and doing that?
Oh, and I was so good about coloring in the line. Now,
and
like,
now you're making the beads, so you've got it down.
It's part of my childhood, coming back. But yeah.
And I'm still messy, so
There you go, Van Gogh. That's great. So now we should open it up to questions, I think, if anybody has. Yeah.
I have a question. What's so, look, I've seen these before, but looking at them today, the absence of people is so dramatic. And I don't get the sense of you in the car. I get the sense of what's happening in our world today.
Yeah.
That it's maybe the end of the world and no one's around. And that's what I'm kind of resonating. So why, here there's no people. So what's your idea?
That great observation. I actually made two little paintings that had people in them, but it wasn't like my thing. And it wasn't really, it was, I think I just was thinking of like that was my thing, like landscape. I wasn't really thinking of people, of relating to people in them. And you said something else I was going to respond to.
Well, the end of the world, this is all that's left.
Oh, and I was thinking that I went, like, to me, so this painting here, there was one painting, like, so most of these are older, all of them, and one I repainted, as I said. The path on one of them I switched to make it so that it turned back in space. And this one was really dark, And I thought, oh, you know, the world is so dark and horrible now. I have to like make it more cheerful. And so all the light in it on the right is I kind of added
fake.
for this show. It was like I wanted to. Yeah.
Do you think that's because we're feeling so dark right now? You were
Yeah, it
trying
was
to
like
make
I
us feel
couldn't,
better?
it was like I didn't want them to be, I didn't want it to be that dark. Because it was kind of like this dark painting that had this, almost like one of those, you know, like cartoon things, like where it was sort of just that lighter circle in the middle. But I just, yeah, I wanted it to
So
be.
you're an optimist.
I would like everything to be more cheerful. But I paint on junk, so, but.
I mean,
I like contradictions.
yeah. I mean, the nice thing is, if it is the end of the world, at least nature is still growing. Green
But
things are
the
growing.
Meadowlands, it's like it's still going, even though it's toxic, it's still
Yeah.
fighting back.